I'd like to call the special called meeting of January 17th, 2017 to order. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
Mr. Connolly.
Here.
Mr. Cater. Here. Ms. Egan.
Here.
Ms. Hazard.
Here.
Ms. Healy. Here. Mr. Hirons.
Here.
Mr. McOsker. Madam Chair, you have a quorum?
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the single item agenda?
Move to approve.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The agenda is approved. And our sole item is the presentation of the superintendent's FY18 recommended budget to the school board. And we'll turn it over to Dr. Benson. Just what I was thinking, most of this will be a presentation, certainly this evening. The Finance and Budget Committee meets tomorrow, so if questions come up or things you want to come through there, raise any things this evening, but I think a lot of this we will mostly be in receiving mode tonight. But if, we can have some discussion, but I would think all of us are going to want to chew on it a little bit. Yep, mine too. So, all right, Dr. Benson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. And it's my pleasure this evening to present a superintendent's funding request for fiscal year 2018. This is a fairly high-level overview. Our plan is to have the books ready for the board by the end of the week to have all of the detail that supports this request, and we'll bring copies for you all to the retreat on Saturday. And then, of course, we have a work session scheduled for next week, Tuesday, and that will be another opportunity to ask more specific questions. Before I get started, I do want to thank everybody that has had some input into this this budget. The amount of effort that we saw across various areas of responsibility, whether it's in finance or HR, our administrators, input from my teacher advisory group and my parent advisory group. I feel really good about the request moving forward, and it's been vetted fairly well, I think. It's a place to start the conversation. I want to make sure that I really state that, because in the next couple of months, things are probably going to change in terms of the clarity that we see coming out of Richmond regarding what the governor has proposed. We've got an estimate in here for local revenue that could potentially change. And then the board may decide as we move through this to reallocate or readjust based upon other things that have come to your attention. It is firmly rooted, though, in not only our strategic plan, but also the goals that you all established for this budget process. Okay, so with that, I will go ahead and get started. And I put the baseline ones are included in the presentation. Whoops. There we go. So, I always like to start with, well, what did we do last year with the resources that we had available? Because we made some significant progress as a school system. We did provide 2% across the board increases a year ago. We raised our starting teacher pay to $42,238. That's significant for us. 2 years ago, before we started making differential adjustments in compensation, our entry-level teacher salary was at the bottom of our comparison groups, and it was the lowest in the region. And now we are the highest, with the exception of Points North. But we have Prince William and Loudoun County in our comparison group, so they impact our target. It's just they're not the target. So significant improvement there. We aligned our healthcare benefits with the market last year in a shared effort with local government. We made it much more affordable for folks that are looking to stay in the county and perhaps want to have a family. So significant improvement there. But simply by aligning contributions with what we find in the market in other areas with healthcare regarding single subscriber versus family subscriber. So it was a significant positive shift for us as an organization. We adopted a market-based compensation model for maintenance and technology staff that is being implemented this year, which means next year, if the board approves the funding, will be our first year of having those folks have access to a merit pool based upon their evaluations. We have about 150 employees in that category. The board implemented class size standards and significantly reduced elementary class sizes in a manner that is absolutely noticeable all across the division. And then not only did we fund a new financial management system, we implemented it. And we used Munis to build the non-compensation portion of this year's of the FY15 budget, which is a significant improvement for us. Also want to just note again that this request is firmly rooted in our new strategic plan, focusing on achievement, workforce, resource stewardship, and communication. And I think you'll see that theme throughout the presentation. So what's different about the FY18 budget development? Well, first of all, the non-compensation budget was built in Munis, and this is the first time that we did that, first time we've used the budgeting tool in Munis. We reviewed 3-year adopted actuals with every fund manager to look at trends and made adjustments accordingly. We implemented new budget codes, which effectively implemented a zero-based budget across the division as a whole. Whereas we had set out to really target just a couple of areas. We had indicated to the board we were looking at technology and transportation as a place to do that zero-based budgeting. Because of the level of explanation that is required in aligning with the new budget codes, you'll find that the supporting documentation for the individual lines in the budget is pretty significant. And I think you'll be pleased as you begin to dig into it. And then we have established new budget baseline codes, or budget code baselines. And the reason for that is that what has happened over the years is that we have spent money in certain parts of our budget where that money was not necessarily allocated initially. And so there was a great deal of effort to align where the projected expenditures were going to go and make sure the revenue were in those codes. So that creates some anomalies when you go to look at the percentage increases across budget codes. So you might see a line that says that has a 3,000% increase. Well, it may say that there's a 3,000% increase. It means that that code was increased by that much, but that doesn't mean that that much money wasn't spent in a previous year. It just came from another location. We found that to be particularly true in the area of instruction, and Dr. Strike really did an exceptional job at realigning those resources. So you'll get an opportunity to see that when you get your budget book. And then when you look at the individual departments, you'll see not only their operational non-compensation increases, but you'll see what change in FTEs there are in each one of those departments. The downside of it is it makes it hard to compare what we have this year with what we did last year because of those funds being realigned. The positive side is that it will make next year really easy for us to look at those increases across the board. And I realize that this is very difficult to read, but as we get into the work sessions and begin to work with FAB, the tools that we have available to us inside of Munis are pretty incredible. And so I just grabbed a couple of screenshots here that Mr. Fulmer provided to me. The supporting documentation, this has to do with, this slide has to do with technology replacement cycles, down to the number of machines and how old they are. Included in the backup information for this budget request. So the school board set budget goals, and these are the baseline kind of summary of those things that you asked us to do in bringing together this request. So direct resources to support staffing and training, meeting basic needs, and you'll see that for across the board, particularly in the area of students where we're seeing an increase in needs in the area of special education. Support the C5W work and training, fund 5 diagnosticians, which not only was high on your list, but was also high on elementary principals' lists. Getting additional resources into professional development. The board, approved the funding for the Teaching and Learning Summit at our last board meeting. We've incorporated recurring funding in next year's request so that we can continue doing that work. Continue to work on supporting the staffing plan, and so we're going to maintain, and in some areas we'll give the board an opportunity to increase some of the areas where you've set goals in terms of staffing. Fund that VRS mandated increase, which the rate increase is going to cost us about $2.5 million. Okay, a significant bump up. 1% increase to all employees not subject to teacher contract adjustment. We're going to talk about that a little bit more specifically in a minute. It's really important to understand also, though, that not all teachers saw that approximately 1% across the board. We have a group of folks, particularly our most senior teachers, greatest number of years of experience, that didn't get that because we didn't change the entry point or the maximum point in the scale. So there's some correction, I feel, that we need to do in going back and making adjustments for FY18. Establish paraprofessional bus driver and nurse compensation models, and when you said bus driver, I included bus monitors in that effort. And so we have presented to you already the paraprofessional and nurse compensation models, which the board has received. I'm going to share some information tonight about the bus driver model that we're going to be proposing. And the monitor model is very similar to the bus driver model. So I think if we get a handle on what we're trying to do with bus drivers, it will make sense about what we're trying to do with monitors. And then continue to support that market median model for teachers. So Mr. McOsker, bottom line up front, okay? Our FY adopted budget, $269 million. The recommended increase is $282. So we have an increase of about $13 million. So there are some assumptions that are built into this. This represents a 4.86% increase, and it uses the governor's proposed budget. So that certainly could change in the coming months as legislative folks get to work on what they might want to see differently there. It assumes a 5% increase in health care that we want the division to cover. We want to try and not pass along any increases in health care. This is a little bit of a challenge for us right now because we don't know exactly what might happen at the federal level and if there would be an impact on what we're offering to our employees. So we'll have to see what happens here in the coming months. It uses a projected increase in daily membership, average daily membership of 701 students. We are clearly growing, and you'll see the biggest increase here is going to be in our state dollars, and it's largely due to that additional 701 students. Assumes a 2% increase in local revenue. That is projected. That is not confirmed, but we think that is in the ballpark of what we will likely see at the local level. And then it requires an additional $5.9 million in revenue to balance. The county obligation for school debt service is projected to increase, and so that may be helpful to us in looking at local revenue. So there are our revenue projections, and you can see at the state level, that's where we're seeing the greatest increase, 4.65%, an additional $6.9 million. Again, largely due to increase in our average daily membership. A little drop off in federal revenues. These federal revenues are revenues that hit our books from a compensation perspective, operational perspective. It does not include our grants, so there are other federal funds there. That decrease is largely due to what we project as a potential continued loss of impact aid regarding providing how we provide additional support for our military families. We didn't hit the threshold for percentage of identified in the school division this year. We're not sure we're going to hit it next year, so we're recognizing that as a potential loss. And then again, as I spoke to earlier, we're estimating a 2% increase in local revenue. That PY stands for prior year fund carryover. We funded a portion of this year's budget with one-time savings from last year, so we need to back that out. And then we are recommending to the board that we no longer have a transfer from school nutrition. There's a level of justification that we have not been providing that we really should. That should not just be a number, but should be a number that we can substantiate based upon actual expenses that are incurred by the program. What we're asking school nutrition to do in turn is to take on a greater responsibility for some of their capital improvement, equipment-wise. And so there's a trade-off there, but in the long haul, it'll kind of be a wash. But we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into some of the other details in work sessions. So there's our gap, $5.9 million, a $13 million increase, approximately $5.9 million gap. Not insurmountable, but certainly a stretch goal for the organization. We'll have to decide, how much of that we want to take on, what the board wants to do in terms of advocating for additional resources, and have we identified the right parts of where the board would like to see the increases moving forward. So there is an increase in FTEs projected here based upon what we have presented to the board of 68. The majority of those are classroom teachers and paraprofessionals. You'll also see that some of those positions were funded after we approved last year's funding request. So we have to make sure that we've incorporated the funding to continue to support those positions. So for teachers, we added 11.5 FTEs after the adoption of the FY budget. We need to make sure that we roll that in there. A couple of paraprofessionals as well. The diagnosticians, as I mentioned, because of the increase in number of students, we need to bump up the number of counselors that we have in order to support what we are required to have in terms of ratio. There's support for special education. We think the board can close out our commitment to staffing math specialists by adding 2 additional math specialists, so you could hit that staffing standard if the board is interested in supporting that. We had some discussion with the board during work sessions last year about computer technician trainers. We need 1 additional position in that area to meet the board's staffing standard there. We added an accountability specialist after the FY17 adoption. We have to continue to fund that. That 2 FTEs and Head Start custodians. We had 2 FTEs on the books that were not funded. They have not been funded for a number of years, and so in trying to up and make sure that we're aligned with FTEs, we wanted to acknowledge that those 2 FTEs would be coming out. They have not been funded. We've talked to the board a little bit about moving to a facilitator model with our Office of Learning and Organizational Development. One of the positions that we feel strongly would be a good add for us as an organization is a world language culture facilitator. And then I have 3 positions here that are central positions. This is not an area that I have advocated strongly for in the past. There are some needs here as we continue to grow as a school system, and the level of support that we're providing to our employees in the division, as well as our parents and students community, that really indicate that we need a little bit of shoring up here. It's not significant in terms of percentage if you look at the number where the majority of FTEs are going, which are positions that are directly impacting teaching and learning across the division. But I will say that these positions will have an impact on the organization as a whole. VRS is becoming increasingly more complicated. We think that that's a position that should be funded as a separate set of responsibilities in finance. The board is acutely aware of the growth challenges that we are facing. There was some number of years ago, it may have been as many as 5 or 6, there was a demographic planner that was cut out of facilities and maintenance, and I'm suggesting, we're recommending that we put that back in. And then we have an ERP systems analyst that has been funded as a part of getting the new ERP up and running. We'd like to continue with that person in the organization as an add, given the complexity of the system. And we still have a lot of work to do with moving that along for the organization as a whole. Just want to remind the board that we focus on 5 areas when we think about our employees: recruiting and retaining high-quality folks, compensation, benefits, work-life recognition, and professional development. And we've hit most of these areas as a part of this funding request. I do want to take a step back, though, and look at the investment from a financial perspective without looking at professional development that we put into employees. I've got just 2 examples here. One is a teacher who has a master's degree that is on level 10. You can see the salary is at the top there, $46,184. That's just one piece, though, of the salary. That's the baseline. You add the master supplement, FICA, group life insurance, VRS, health insurance, bereavement, personal, and sick leave, and you can see what was could be characterized as a baseline $46,000 position is actually a $75,000 position when you roll up all of those other commitments that we make to our employees. And then we have a similar example with bus driver with a salary of $21,000. Add those additional benefits and support, and we're up to $37,219. And we have this conversation with the board on an annual basis about what is it that we're budgeting for a teacher. Well, it's the whole package that has to be included in those costs. So just a couple of examples. We've got more that the board could look at as we move into work sessions if you'd like to be able to do that. So what are the highlights of compensation and benefits? We want to maintain that additional 1% for teachers. We added that as a part of the correction for the error in the published scale that we had during the budget process last year. We funded it by buying ahead in a number of areas. We need to make sure that we are committed to funding that with recurring dollars, and so we absolutely want to do that. I also want to say, though, is that we have some teachers in that group, and I'm talking about teachers that are at the maximum end of the scale that didn't see that adjustment because we didn't change the top level of compensation. We should go back and adjust those, which is included in the next line, extending the 1% increase to all employees. We have, again, significant improved compensation for teachers. We were crossing the median of the market at 15 years when we started making differential adjustments based upon the median of the market. After 1 year, we got to 12. We are right now at 9, and we're continuing on a path there that will get us to the median of the market if the board holds steady on the compensation model that you formally adopted. We want to enhance scale, and so we've got a lump sum in here. We'll discuss with the board how we might distribute that across the employee groups where we have the market data to suggest something should be different. But teachers, we need to continue to support differentiated adjustment enhancement for teachers. We added last year the technology folks and maintenance, and then this year we're proposing to add paraprofessionals, bus drivers, bus monitors, and nurses to the mix. And we'll talk about how that $1.1 million could have a positive impact on those scales. We have to fund the VRS rate increase, which is the 2.5. We need to offset that projected health care insurance increase, which we look at not just short of $1 million. We need to establish a merit pool. That was part of the model that was approved for the technology and skilled maintenance folks. That merit pool includes not only any salary adjustments that folks might receive, but also the FICA that goes along with that. So there are about 150 employees in that group, and based upon their evaluations and scores that they get, they will have a chance to improve their compensation by having access to some portion of that merit pool. And the last is providing bonuses. The governor has included that in his budget. He's proposing that would take place if funds are available in December of 17. So I'm asking the board to take a little bit of a wait and see as to how that plays out, how that's received by the legislature, and whether or not that materializes. If the money is made available, it will only be available to provide bonuses for SOQ funded positions. And then the board will have to decide, in the event that that occurs, do we want to try and do something for all employees if we have the resources. So if we could play a little bit of the waiting game there, we might be in a better position to figure out what we could do across the board, if that's possible, and then whether or not it materializes. And quite honestly, I'm not confident that it will, but we'll see. I want to talk now a little bit more about bus drivers, because the board hasn't seen some of this information that is driving why we need to look differently at bus driver compensation. And keep in mind that what we're looking at here really applies to our monitors, bus monitors as well. So there's the other data that supports that, but I didn't want to use too much of the time this evening to look at all of that. So this is turnover, and I know that the image is a little bit blurry, but if you can take a look at where we're seeing the greatest amount of turnover, folks that are not returning, you can see that for the most part, it's in the first few years of folks' employment with us. We're seeing significant number of folks that work for us during the first year and either quit during the first year or quit in the second year. So part of what we learned in looking at the compensation model is that we're out of line, but not everywhere in the model. We are particularly out of line in years 1 through 6, the entry portion of the scale. So one of the things that we'll be asking the board to consider is an adjustment to the scale for bus drivers that focuses on the entry portion of the scale and moving to a pay banding model. So we did an analysis, and we're second to the worst here in terms of compensation for bus drivers. These have been adjusted to include a little bit of cost of living consideration. The only division that is doing worse than us is Albemarle. Everybody else is doing better. So clearly, something needs to happen here in terms of improvement. So what we're proposing is that we move drivers onto a pay band model, with first-year drivers going in at pay band level A01, which would get us to a minimum hourly rate of $14.65 based on that pay band. We might probably not be able to get there all at one time, but we use a strategy that's similar to what we're doing with teachers. So we establish the target, we put an amount in that the board is comfortable, and we distribute it based upon how far out of market folks are. So we absolutely can improve over time. It's not likely that we can get there all in one budget cycle, but we'll see what the board thinks about when we bring the more specific information about how this will impact folks during a work session. So here's our plan. We're asking the board to put bus drivers that are first-year drivers on pay band 01. Okay, keep in mind, again, we have significant drop-off between first year and second year. So what we're trying to do is incentivize folks to stay with us past that first year. So provided they have a good year in their first year and they take defensive driving and the behavior management training, we would move them to pay band A02 in the second year. And if you go back and take a look at that, you're going from a minimum of 1465 to a minimum of 1611. So some significant improvement if we, they have a good year and they take those two courses. And then we believe that the responsibilities of lead bus drivers and trainers are different from other drivers, and that they should be on pay band A03. So if you go back again and look at the pay band A03, that has a minimum of $17.39 per hour. And then we want to maintain support for these attendance bonuses that we have implemented this year. We've had about 3 months of experience in having those attendance bonuses out there. And just to remind folks what that is an additional $10 a day for a month if you don't call out during that month at all, and then it starts over the next month. And so drivers can effectively increase their hourly rate by more than $1 an hour by looking at their attendance. And there are certainly exceptions in there, things that get called away for you're required to, and they're identified in the model. But it appears, in looking at just 3 months of data, it appears to be improving attendance for drivers. When we briefed this with a kind of a core group of drivers, someone said how much they appreciate this initiative, and they were concerned that perhaps it might get taken away if it wasn't producing results. Well, right now it looks like it is producing results. The other thing is that if we decided that we want to do something different, you just make acceptable attendance part of the driver evaluation, and then folks that have acceptable attendance or excellent attendance get a bigger percentage of the merit pool that's available to that particular group, something that's pretty easy for us to quantify, which I think would be in a positive direction for us. So again, two areas that we're trying to influence here. One is we've got these folks in 1 through 6 that are leaving us, so we want to try and make that more competitive, and we want to provide an incentive for folks staying with us, particularly in transitioning from year 1 to year 2. And then we want to encourage folks to come to work regularly, and we want to keep that attendance bonus moving forward, and we budgeted to do both of those things. This is the number of drivers and monitors that it will impact. We have 178 drivers. Mr. Sudoff would tell you that we really need like about 220. I was thinking 200, but he's like, I said that today, he's like, no, it should be like 220. So we have ways to go, first of all. But of that 178, 115 of them are below the minimum of what we're proposing in this pay band model. And for bus monitors, 43 bus monitors, 41 of them are below minimum in the recommended pay model. So health insurance, we're projecting a 5% increase. It may not be that bad, we just don't know. It'll probably be the end of February, but we just haven't had enough experience because we went live with our new plan in October. So we need to, we'll get a report from Anthem, and we'll see how we're doing, and they'll give us an estimate about what we might expect in terms of increase. I think that percentage increase is the same percentage increase that local government is projecting, at least as a starting point for next year. So workplace climate is important, right? It's not all about the compensation and benefits. The board will receive a formal report on our climate survey data from this current year. Likely it will be next month, but there are a few data points that I want to share with the board because we'd like folks to be happy about coming to work. We had 2,576 employees participate in this year's survey. This is the section that deals with leadership. Leadership treats me with respect. We went from 81% to 86%, gain of 5%. Is effective, a 10%. Facilitates communication effectively, 8% increase, or increase of 8%, and then it's effective in helping us reach our mission and vision, a +6. I really like that 86% of our folks that responded feel like leadership treats them with respect, because that's what we should be about. And there's lots of other positive data here that we'll be sharing with the board. Keep in mind, this is aggregate data. It represents the division as a whole. There are areas in the division that we need to improve, okay, whether it be a school or a department, and the board will have an opportunity to see that when we look at more detailed information. I am thinking that for some of our high flyer schools and departments that it's probably not necessary for us to assess every year, because I've got 3 years, we have 3 years of pretty positive data for a number of schools and departments. We might take an approach that's similar to what the state is taking with accreditation, and not assess those schools every year, but continue to focus on areas that need to be improved. And I have made that very clear to staff across the division that we do expect it to improve. We also want to make sure that staff has had an opportunity to share, or leadership has had an opportunity to share their results with either their schools or the departments before it gets shared publicly with you all. But again, we expect that to happen in February. So in terms of professional development growth, that's another one of our 5 areas with our total rewards focus. We have continued support for our New Teacher Institute. One of the things that I communicated to the board is that as we begin to build additional capacity within the school system, we don't want to be in a position to have to back off on those things. So doing that improvement in a manner that is sustainable is really important. So compensating our new teachers that are coming to essentially our New Teacher Institute a week prior to this, when our regular returning teachers come back to learn about us and our way, and get compensated to the tune of $500 that is a net for them, because we cover the taxes on that. Helps them to bridge from when they get their first check. So that's been a really nice add for the organization as a whole. Continued support for course conference reimbursement. That's an area that we certainly could put some additional resources in, but we've also tried to, in developing this budget, you'll see as you go through departments, you'll see that there are small pockets of funds that are set aside within the departments to help with professional development. Funding for year 2 of the Teaching and Learning Summit is included. So again, our intention is to have that be a recurring opportunity. That we had a nice article in the Freelance Star that recognized that effort, and I'm hopeful that just becomes part of the way that we do business on an annual basis. And then funding for realignment of the Office of Learning and Organizational Development, trying to move toward more of a facilitator coaching model and a little bit greater focus on curriculum development for the school division as a whole. And then some additional expenditure considerations in terms of replacement cycles. So one of the things that we learned in going through the budgeting process that we did this time is that the resources that we have available for technology, in the manner that they distributed them and supported them with appropriate documentation, seems to indicate that we are on schedule to maintain the current inventory, which is great news. That one of the things the board asked us to focus on is replacement cycles. Now, that being said, I would also say we probably don't have enough access to technology in the division, so we're going to want to look to see how we're going to increase student access to those resources. One of the things that we'll have in our favor is our ability now to use Chromebooks for SOL testing, a less expensive device that perhaps could help our technology dollars go further, and then there are other technologies out there that we might want to consider. Included in this funding request are 15 buses. So, if you look at a 15-year replacement cycle, that if it's 15 years, that's about the number that we would need to have on an annual basis. We might need 1 or 2 more in a given year, but if we can stay there year after year, that will become very predictable for us. Staffing differentiation. We try to recognize, particularly at the elementary level, the different sizing of schools. And so we have put money into the school budgets to help with hourly office staff in our largest elementary schools, and then we're going to have to look at a differentiated model for use of those 5 diagnosticians. There are other staffing standards that are based upon size of school that we really need to explore, and I would ask that the board consider that as we go into the work sessions, is that there might be something else that you want to try and begin to make some progress on. Redirection of savings. We budgeted salary attrition lapse of $1 million. So that's included on the front end of this budget. And then we've identified operational savings of $850,000. And again, that comes from looking at 3-year trends in accounts and making sure that what we're projecting for our expenditures is aligned with that pattern. And then in terms of contingency, we've always had an unfunded contingency. That is simply there in the event that additional funds become available to us, whether it's a grant or through some other mechanism that allows the board then to utilize those resources without asking for appropriation from the supervisor. So that is there for some flexibility. But we also have a funded contingency proposed in this particular budget of $500,000. And the reason for that is that we're getting to the point where our projected expenditures are much closer to projected revenue, and we need a little bit of assurance there as we monitor our expenditures during the course of the year to make sure that we end up on the right side of the balance sheet when we get to the end of the fiscal year. This is the area that I don't think we did a very good job in, and that has because it's not recurring. Okay, we have $500 million in assets in the organization, buildings. We have a list of about $6 million of infrastructure improvements that need to occur, which we have been funding with cash over time. My preference would be to find some way to move to some kind of shared cash capital model with local government so that this becomes a little bit more predictable for us over time. Right now, what I'm recommending to the board is that we can fund about 1/3 of those requests, $2 million, with projected current year savings. The challenge will be how close to the end of the year do we want to wait so that we're comfortable that we will have the resources available. I think we'll be close to that when the year is all said and done. So some of the projects might not take place until after the close of the fiscal year. But as we approach the end of the fiscal year, if the board's comfortable with what we're projecting and additional savings, you certainly could have the opportunity to say we're going to start working on some of these improvements. We have to take care of our facilities. I say this every year with capital. Pay now or pay later, and if you wait to pay later, you're going to pay a lot more. So we're fortunate that our facilities are in the shape that they're in. At the same time, we have to continue to take care of them over time. So again, I'd like to see this in recurring dollars. It is not at this point, and this is, again, an estimate of what I see as projected savings in the current fiscal year. So there it is, hard to read. It's the one sheet that has all of the revenues and expenditures there, and this will absolutely be included in the board's book that will have all of the backup information and detailed department by department adjustments. So what's next? We'll distribute budget books to the board on the 21st. We do have a FAB meeting tomorrow night, but board work session scheduled for 5 o'clock on January 24th. One of the things that we'll be doing at that work session is showing some proposed scales to the board based upon the enhancements and 1% increase that for all employees that we've included in the request. And then we'll have some conversation about whether or not you think that's an appropriate amount, because you certainly could slide dollars from one employee category to another. And we are hopeful that in our deliberation, and hopefully again that we'll see some more information coming out of Richmond, that the board will be in a position to consider and approve the FY18 budgets at the end of February. So with that, Madam Chair, that concludes Superintendent's proposed funding request for FY '18.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask if any board members have any comments or anything they would wish to say at this time. Ms. Egan, you want to start us off?
Thank you for that. One thing that I am going to ask is that when the FAB gets together tomorrow night, please remind me again who's on that? Scott,
Guys.
Myself, Dwayne, and
Dwayne?
And Chris.
And Chris.
It's the guys.
Okay, I wasn't on it very long, but we had a conversation about considering if we had some carryover money that we would look at maybe doing some of the safety improvements to the athletic facility at Brook Point High School. If you could just keep that in the back of your mind, that if there's an opportunity, I would like to, maybe see that happen. I think we asked Scott Horan for some information about what the cost estimate would be for something like that, to put in a staircase and to put in lights and things like that. So I don't know if we need to go back to him.
well, Roberta, if you could put it on the agenda, and if we could touch base with Scott to find out if he has any of that data as of yet, that he could bring it or provide it for tomorrow night.
Thank you. And then the other things I just wanted to mention is that, we've been kind of beaten on this, if everything is a priority, nothing is a priority concept. And it's always been, after the teachers, we were going to look at the paras and the bus drivers. And I would really, really like to see some significant money going back towards the paras and the bus drivers to bring them back in line with everyone else. So that's all I'm going to say. Thanks.
Any other comments?
Sure, I'll bite.
Go ahead, Mr. Pastor.
No, thanks for the presentation, Dr. Benson. It seems like a pretty tight briefing that your staff and you kind of worked on, and Chris. So it's good work. We've got a lot of challenges with the $5 million to try to figure out how we're going to come up with that money. But we'll do our best, I'm sure. And I'll agree with Ms. Egan that remember, the paraprofessionals were the first to come to the board, and then the bus drivers right behind them with their compensation model, and how much the paras and the bus drivers are. I consider the paras and the bus drivers and the nurses, of course, but they touch the kids. Paras are in the room with the kids. Bus drivers are bringing them from home. So that's something I think we need to really look at. We've been saying we're going to give them a bump, and I love the paras and the bus drivers. It seems that it's we're not doing too well across the counties, and so it's the proof's in the pudding. And I think this is the last thing, just with the first time looking at this. Also, I really do hope those bonuses come in, because we do have those senior teachers out there. That I think, we really lean on those senior teachers to teach our new teachers and our new teacher institute, and then once they get into the school, the new teachers let's make sure we take a good look at our senior teachers to ensure that they're getting their fair wage, and and supporting them for all that they do. So thank you very much, Dr. Benson.
Ms. Healy?
Thank you. When we have our work session, I would like to get some more information about the proposed duties of these new positions that we have,
Absolutely.
particularly the VRS. Interesting, to have a position for that. But I'm also, and I don't know if you want to do this or not, but it would be helpful if we had some kind of priorities among those positions. The teachers and the paras I'm considering a given, but these other new positions that are being proposed, because realistically, I'd be surprised if we're going to be able to fund, all of them. But as Ms. Egan says, if everything's a priority, nothing. I think you're the one that told us that. Like to know where you feel the greatest need is. And then the last thing I'd like to get is some information about the capital improvement issues. It appears that some of those could be safety or compliance issues. And if they are, I would say they're not going to be,
We'll have the complete list
negotiable.
for the board.
If you could give us some more information, because we have traditionally looked at safety issues. If there is an issue of a safety concern for the staff or the students, that's always been, a priority and taken care of. And then the one thing about the wheelchair lifts, I'm concerned if they need to be replaced. if that's a compliance issue. Besides the fact, if they need to be replaced, then we should be doing it.
Absolutely,
You
Ms.
should,
Seeley.
we should be considering whether we're going to do it. And on these, fire alarm panels and, we've had issues with tracks before among several of our high schools where there have been some serious safety issues about, where the students are running. We don't want them tripping and, hurting themselves. So if we could just get
Something
some
I
more
know for-
information on that.
Something I know firsthand.
That's right. Oh, do you run on our tracks?
I have run on our tracks, yeah. I haven't tripped on our tracks.
Oh, well, that's a good thing.
I've tripped elsewhere.
Well, I think we've been doing a fairly, good job of keeping up with it. But, if we know about it, I mean, and we're not talking about small dollars here either. I mean, these are pretty significant, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I would like to get some more information on that for the work session. Thank you.
Just curious, real quick, on the chart you have with the bus driver turnover, there's quite a difference between year one and year two, and then still a big difference between year two and year three. What methodology did you use to determine that it was actually pay that caused this drop-off and not folks that said after a year, wow, this isn't for me?
We can't say that for certain that it is pay in every case, but we also know that it's a complicated job if you're new to doing that job, which is why we want the drivers to participate in the defensive driving training as well as behavior management for buses, because we think that will improve their experience as well. So I think it's a combination of issues. And it is it's a unique time requirement. That's the other thing in terms of when we need you to do that work. But we'd be happy to provide additional information, Mr. Connolly.
I was just curious how it did that. Okay, thank you.
We do, and that's another note, we do exit surveys for folks that leave us. We try and get that information for every employee that leaves us. Sometimes it's a little bit more challenging to get that across the board, but we do look at that.
No, the only thing I wanted to make sure, and Dr. Benson did state it as well, but for the board, we do have a Finance and Budget Committee meeting tomorrow night, 7 p.m., right back here. We probably won't dive deep into the budget as presented necessarily, and we'll save a lot of our questions probably directly about its budget presentation for next Tuesday. But if anyone does have any questions that you want to send to us, please feel free to send me an email tomorrow or tonight about anything, or come and attend.
All right, if everybody had their say. I'd like to just say, I am thrilled that the board has gone to setting our budget priorities, early in the year, and I would like to say, we always come in with the big laundry list, but listening to what Dr. Benson said, I'm almost putting check marks by almost everything in our priorities list, and so I know that was no easy feat, I'm sure, to bring that. I would also point out that VRS increase, just so all of us are aware, that was not projected to be that high. If the implementation schedule that the state had, if they had stuck to the one that they had, it would have been significantly less. I'm sure Chris knows the numbers. But so we are being dealt another unfunded mandate that's probably in the area of $1.5, $1.7 million, something like that. So I just want to also say sometimes we are handed stuff tonight that we have to fund. It's not an option. So I am very excited that we've gotten to the salary reexamination in these other areas. I know that has been a big priority of the board, so thank you very much for bringing those to us. Just in case for next steps, this is actually Dr. Benson's funding request. I know most board members know this, but now we will debate it. Before we go over to the Board of Supervisors, we will have our opportunity to look and to delve into this document and determine what stays in, what stays out, whether, those kinds of things. So certainly, we take our time and look at this, but we also have some things out of our control, like the state, and we will await guidance there. I did note $500 million worth of stuff that we take care of in this. That is not our students, that is our buildings. That's a lot of things that we need to, I think, long-term go to this CIP and really looking at how we're going to fund that. and that we think we may have an increase of 701 students. That's pretty significant to me. Go ahead, Mr. Irons.
Just one quick go back, I just said it was 7 PM, it's 6 PM tomorrow night. Roberta, you didn't catch it.
She was
Six-
probably,
I know. 6 PM, Finance and Budget Committee, right back here tomorrow night,
I will be
here.
really on time. Maybe 5 minutes late, I have a scout conference, so at 5, so I should be there on time.
and then also, I know we have the joint schools meeting, I believe, is next Monday at 6 at North Stafford High School. Is that correct? Okay. All right, any other closing comments or thoughts? If not, we are adjourned. Thank you, Dr. Benson.